Hey all, welcome to my new video, and today we will be having a look at Laravel Doctrine, unit testing and integration testing. So to get started, I think the best place would be to actually show you some of the changes I've made to my Jenkins file so that it works nicely with Jenkins, the unit testing and the integration testing. So the only part that I've changed so far is this stage test part. So we've got an agent any here, which says that we want to run this stage on the actual node. Well, it says that because I actually only have one node at the moment, and that is sort of the master node. But so it's safe for me to use agent any here. And under that we've got steps here, and this is the sort of the meat of what I'm doing here. And then under steps I've got the script. So what the script says is that we want to use sort of a scripting language, which is, I think, a derivative or very close to something called Groovy. And in the script, so this allows us to kind of do more advanced stuff. So in here, I've got a MySQL image that I'm starting up. And I kind of give it a database and a password. And then inside of that, I'm starting up another sort of container. And this container is just the client that connects to this sort of server container up here, and all this does then is waits for the MySQL server to start up. And then below that I've actually got sort of my application, and then I've got another Docker image here that gets spins up as a container, and inside that I link to this sort of server DB, and then all I do is I just run my unit test within this Docker image in here. So this is kind of why we had to go back to the sort of the master agent or the actual server instead of a sort of Docker container, because we need to instantiate this Docker container, and then we need to instantiate this Docker container as well. And then below that we just sort of post the results of this test as we did before. So the other thing that I changed to enable all of this is in my PHP unit file I've got these sort of database settings here that I use for my integration tests. Now let's quickly have a look at the actual tests folder. So I've got this unit one, which is for my unit tests. And in here I create a mock entity manager interface. So what this does, it sort of creates a version of this entity manager interface that we can kind of control. So when we send a particular set of parameters, in this case sort of any set of parameters, to this function, then this is supposed to return null. And if we send any sort of parameters to this get class metadata, then we return this class metadata of sort of type user, and then we pass that into the user repository. So when the user repository gets created, it calls this class metadata, which is then caught by this mock interface, and that then returns to us this class metadata. And that's how we kind of use a mock object to instantiate a copy of the user repository without actually having to deal with the database at all. So below that we've got an actual test here. So these two lines create us a sort of dummy user, and what we then tell it to is we tell it that when we run this create user, as we expect this persist function to run exactly only once. And then what we do with this assert equals is we then test that the username that we get back from this create function is the same user name that we actually passed into it. And then up here we've got our integration testing. So what this does, this integration test for Laravel, it tries to kind of make a dummy request to a controller with all of the sort of Laravel container stuff in the backend. So what we're doing here is that we're calling register first. We're only calling using the get method here because what we want is we want this CSFR token that we then get via this little piece of code here. We create sort of a fake password, create sort of some fake dummy data. We then post that fake sort of dummy data to the register function, and then down here we assert a null on the exception, meaning that it was successful. We assert that we are going to be redirected, and then we assert that that redirection is sort of the home URL over there. And then we've got a second test here which just kind of tests invalid data. So the idea is that it does sort of exactly the same as above, except that we've got a blank email address there. And then what it does down here is we assert that this exception is not null. We assert that we're redirecting, and we are asserting that we are redirecting to the register URL. So if we have a look sort of in Jenkins, so let's have a look under our tests. If we look at the logs, is that you can see, I think over here, is that we have been running 6 tests with 13 assertions. So these tests are these two. It's these two tests. And then it's also, I think, this test. So I actually don't have no idea where that 6th one's coming from. So I'll have a look into that a bit later. But anyway, so the idea is we are running these integration tests, and we are running these unit tests down here. So what we are using for, let's go back I think to the PHP unit file. We've got this feature test suite and we've got this unit test suite. So this feature test suite is we are using that for our integration tests, and we got this unit test suite which we are using for our unit tests. Now you see, one of the other things I did is I set up a run configuration in Jetbrains' IDE for PHP unit, and I say that I want to use a defined configuration file. I want to use this PHP unit file that I have, and I want to run only the test suite for unit on my local machine. Because what will happen because of these parameters down here is that if we try to run our integration tests locally, is that they'll fail because we haven't set up a database for them. But let me just quickly run this PHP unit one for the unit tests, and then you'll see, cool, it passed, right? And then we leave our integration tests for Jenkins because they take a bit more time to run, and that will allow our developers to be able to quickly run only the unit tests and not have to deal with the integration tests, which would take longer because it requires an actual database. And that's why we sort of Doctrine is quite cool for this, for testing, because we can mock these entity manager interfaces, and then we could test sort of some assertions against some methods that deal with models without actually having to deal with the database. Whereas something like Eloquent, which requires or uses the active record pattern, requires an actual database when you want to test with models. And then on SonarQube is those results of those tests gets published. So one of the cool things, if we go to SonarQube here, is you'll see that we've got an overall over entire codebase of a 68.5% coverage. But for new code, we've got a 90% coverage. So one of the things about SonarQube is that if we had less than 80% coverage on only new code, then that would have actually said failed, and it also would have said failed over there. So from a governance perspective, I can look and make sure that we've got no bugs, we've got no debt, and that we actually are testing our code when people are writing new code, which I think is very kind of useful if you have a bunch of projects that you have to manage. And then from a project sort of management or project owner perspective, is they can also make sure that the developers are properly testing the code and making sure that the quality of the code that the developers produce is adequate. And yeah, I think that's it for this video. Thank you so much for joining me. I really hope to see you in the next one. I think in the next one I will be going back to some of the Terraform stuff, because what I'm trying to do next is I'm trying to set up GitLab with Terraform on DigitalOcean, and I really hope you stick around for the next video. If you've got any questions or comments, drop me a comment in the YouTube. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you want to see the next videos that I make about software development and kind of DevOpsy type stuff, then please subscribe. And well, I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers guys, bye bye.